Hello and welcome to one and all. In today's class, we'll discuss about the what are all the factors that hinder the economic development of a particular country. So in the previous class, we have checked what are all the indicators of economic development, starting from rise in the real national income, rise in the real per capita income, and also the welfare, the social needs, multi-dimensional poverty index, etc. Isn't it? So basically, you all know what is the meaning of economic development. So one thing is certain that whatever the structural changes the country is undergoing or not, the country should keep on try to increase the real national income for a long period of time. Simultaneously, they have to make efforts to reduce the poverty, to reduce the unemployment, to reduce the inequalities. So all those other changes should also be happening simultaneously. So then only we are saying that the country is into the process of economic development. So in order to have that economic development, there are certain factors promoting the economic development. Alternatively, there are certain factors preventing or blocking the progress of a particular country. So first, let us take the what are all the factors that hinder the economic development of a particular country. So the first one here is inadequate natural resources. So natural resources is one of the foremost requirements for the development of a particular country. So a country must have at least a minimum amount of fertile soil in order so that the agricultural development can take place, at least a reasonable amount of mineral resources so that the industrial development can take place. So some reasonable amount of talent of labor force. So some minimum amount of resources should be possessed by the country. So that if that natural resources are available, I mean, maybe it is not sufficient, but still it is one of the main ingredients. At least the country can hope to develop its own economy. So if the country is not having that much amount of natural resources, or if the resources are inadequate, then it is one of the basic problems, one of the blockage for the country for its own growth. So either it is the natural resources, it can be either in the form of some of the countries might not be having any natural resources at all, or in other words, non-availability of, it can be either in the form of non-availability of natural resources or available but remain untapped. Untapped means the resources are available, but because of want of technology, so the country is not able to use the available resources. So this kind of situation is happening in most of the African countries. So African countries, they are having the abundant natural resources, but because of want of technology and want of knowledge, they are not able to use that available natural resources. So they remain untapped. Okay, so that is another form. And then or still or for countries like India, it is inefficiently managed resources. There is a saying, India is a rich country inhabited by the poor. India is a rich country. India is rich in natural resources. But then we are not utilizing the natural resources properly because inhabited by the poor. Why the reason is inefficiently managed resources. You can take the example of India. So inefficiently managed resources, what do we mean by uh, proper utilization of the resources? If you have to utilize the resources properly and properly manage the available resources, there are two things, two requirements or two prerequisites are there. So one is there should be the country should have the productive efficiency. So productive efficiency, what is the meaning of productive efficiency? To put it very simply, maximum output least cost combination we say, isn't it? Maximum output at minimum cost. So with the available resources, the country should be able to produce maximum output, and at the same time, it should keep on reducing the cost of production. So if you have the proper skill, proper knowledge, proper technology, proper investment, proper capital output ratio, so if all those things are there in a particular country, there will be productive efficiency. With the available amount of resources in the country, more and more output can be produced. So that efficiency should be there. And then if you're to put it very simply, you should not be wasting the resources. So maximum output should be produced at minimum cost of production. Then the second efficiency we are talking about is something called as the allocative efficiency. So allocative efficiency is, see, there is a saying, we say rob Peter to pay Tom. In figure of speech we used to say, isn't it in English? You're robbing Peter in order to pay Tom. That should not be happening. In order to improve the conditions of one sector of the country, in order to improve the conditions of one batch of people, you should not be taking away the resources from the another batch of people. So the another batch of people should not be deprived of their resources, of their facilities, in order to favor the another section of the poorer sections of the population. So you should not take resources from one sector and put it into another sector. So that is allocative inefficiency. So the resources should be allotted in such a way that every sector is benefiting. You are not taking the resources allotted for from one particular sector to another sector. So if you are doing that, then you are properly managing, you are properly allotting the resources of the country. So if that is there, then if this is not there, then automatically the progress will not be there in a particular country. Economic development will be hindered. Economic development will not take place in that particular country. And having said that, the first one, non-availability of natural resources. I said the availability of certain amount of natural resources is a prerequisite. But there are certain countries, even without any availability of any natural resources, they are able to progress. For example, you take the case of Japan, Switzerland, Singapore. So these are all the countries, even with nil natural resources, they were all able to progress. But that is besides the point. So for the rest of the countries, majority of the countries, in order to have that economic development, there should be sufficient amount of natural resources, and the country should be able to use the resources, tap the resources properly, and also manage the resources properly. For example, if you take India, see, whatever the commodity which were able to produce, whatever the crop which we can cultivate, that should be comparatively lesser cost. See, at some point of time, the climatic conditions and the soil and the fertility, they were favoring the production of rice, that is paddy, wheat, and cotton. So instead of cultivating these kinds of crops, the cultivation was happening in other kinds like sugarcane, oil seeds. So the available resources, or in the form of the, depending upon the nature of the fertility of the land, depending upon the climatic conditions and all, it was not at all favoring the cultivation of these kind of crops. But still, the land was allotted for the cultivation of sugarcane and oil seeds instead of rice, paddy, and wheat. So this is not an allocative, it is allocative inefficiency. And even for that matter, you take the case of green revolution. So the green revolution is a technological breakthrough in agriculture using the modern methods of cultivation. That is green revolution. But that green revolution also favored only paddy and most importantly wheat. It ignored the pulses, which is the protein content is more in pulses, is the nutritional requirement of the country, of the majority of the people of the country. So that one was ignored. So if you are allotting the resources in these kinds of like this, then you are inefficiently managing the resources. So natural resources should be available at a reasonable quantity. The available natural resources must be tapped and utilized properly, and allotted properly, then only the country's progress will be phenomenal. Okay, so that is the first factor that is hindering the economic development of a country. Then the second one is the low growth rate of human capital. Now, what is the meaning of human capital? Capital invested, highlighted, capital invested on the development of labor force through proper education, skill, and health. That is what is called as the human capital. Okay, so we all know what is the meaning of physical capital. Investing in plant and machinery, that is a physical capital. So the company needs active labor force also, efficient labor force also. In the same way, the country as a whole needs the efficient amount of available supply of human resources. So if for that the country has to invest a certain amount of capital in order to promote the health and education of the country, of the labor force of the country. So if that is not available in a country, so automatically, so this leads a low growth rate of human capital. Why it is happening? Lack of skill. You know the reason. Due to lack of education and health facilities, lack of specialization. So that kind of technology should be imparted to the technical knowledge should be imparted to the labor force of the country so that he or she will be specialized. So that technical skills are not imparted, or that even if the technical skills are not available in the country, majority of the labor force cannot afford to learn all those things. So lack of specialization, lack of mobility. So the lack of mobility in the sense, most of the people in the underdeveloped countries, they won't be willing to move from one place to another place. There might be so many reasons, language, customs, whatever might be the reason. Factor immobility is also, labor immobility is also one of the causes for low growth rate of human capital. And also they, I told you, the country invested, the capital invested on health and education of the development of the labor force in the country. In most of the underdeveloped countries, the gross, whatever you say, the capital invested on the development of human capital is very, very low, especially if you take on health and education. So if the as far as India is concerned, every year the government wants to invest at least 6% of the GDP on health and education, but it is not even crossing 3% of the GDP. So considering the amount of population, considering the amount of labor force entering into the market year after year, this 3% of the GDP is very, very inadequate. So the sufficient amount of capital should be allotted in the budget. So if it is not allotted, how the health and education standards in the country will develop? So that is not happening. So low growth rate of human capital. So that is another reason for another factor that is hindering the economic development. And then the third one is the lack of infrastructure. So lack of infrastructure, all the infrastructural facilities are in a very, very insufficient development. So all the infrastructural facilities. So what do you mean by infrastructure facilities? That is development of all the basic facilities, development of roadways or roads, railways, power. And I just now mentioned about health and education. Health and education comes under the social infrastructure all these other things, banking, transport, communication, power or irrigation, they all come under the economic infrastructure. And infrastructure is the one area which requires a huge amount of, very, very high amount of investment. At the same time, the returns on investment is also very, very less. Maybe because of that reason, that much amount of investment is not happening in the country, and automatically all the infrastructure, all these infrastructural facilities in the country are not developed. So without that infrastructural facilities in the country cannot hope to develop. So this is the basic requirement, are not well developed. Okay, and then the another one is something. Let me clear this. The fourth reason is there is something called as the vicious circle of poverty. So this concept was introduced by Ragnar. So he gave a quotation: a country is poor because it is poor. This is the quotation given by Ragnar. A country happens to be poor, it is circling in that poorness. It is not able to come out of that poverty. So this vicious circle of poverty, how it is affecting the underdeveloped countries, it is affecting both on the demand side as well as on the supply side. So it is countries rotating in the circle of poverty, not able to come out of that poverty. So it is explained in the form of a diagram. So demand side, if you see, so underdeveloped countries, so why it is underdeveloped? Because of low national income. So low national income is happening because of low productivity in the country. So starting with, you have low productivity. So this low productivity, because of the low productivity, there is low generation of income. The production more, income will, production is more, generation will also be more. The production and productivity both are low, automatically the income will also be low. So low generation of income automatically leads to low demand. So low demand leads to, if the demand is not there, no producer will be willing to having any inducement to invest, isn't it? So low inducement to invest. So since low inducement to invest, if there is no investment, then the capital formation will not be there. So there is capital deficiency. So if there is capital deficiency, automatically that leads to low productivity. So this is happening on the demand side. So it just keeps on rotating like this. And when you look from the supply side, again, it starts with the low productivity. Low productivity leads to low generation of income. So if there is, here it is demand, here it is savings. So people are not having any money to spend for consumption, where they will save. So there is low savings. If there is low savings, automatically there is low investment. There is low investment, again that leads to capital deficiency. And capital deficiency, that again leads to low productivity. So this is operating on the supply side. So this is the vicious circle of poverty. Vicious is something evil. So poverty is not good, isn't it? So these underdeveloped countries, they are caught in that vicious circle of poverty. They are not able to come out of it. That's why he said a country is poor because it's poor. So it's already they are poor. They are not able to come out of that poorness. That's why he said the country is poor because it is poor. So this is another factor. A poor country not able to develop economically. So another factor hindering the economic growth. Okay. Then the fifth factor is low rate of, just now we have seen capital deficiency. So low rate of capital formation. So in order to capital formation is savings and investment of a country. To put it very simply, the total savings and the total investment of a country is the capital formation. Just like we are personal income, a part of our personal income we are saving, isn't it? And if you are saving it in the bank, then that is being indirectly invested. So in the same way, the country as a whole, the national income of the country, the part of the national income of the country must be saved and invested. So year after year, if the country keeps on, that is called the capital formation. If year after year, if the country keeps on increasing that percentage of savings and investment, it will multiply. The national income of the country will keep on improving. So now here the capital formation, because of low income, the savings and investment is very, very low in the country. So for the subsequent year, the country is not having that sufficient amount of capital to invest in production. So there are two reasons. One reason is majority of the people in the underdeveloped countries are poor. So isn't it? So what is happening? The majority of the people in the underdeveloped country are poor, and these poorer sections of the people, one is they don't have any money income to save. Okay, so no savings because of low income, or even if they are having any money income, because of all these backward attitudes, they will spend whatever little money income they will spend on gold or any prestigious ceremonies and all, birth ceremony, death ceremony, all these ceremonies have to be done in proper manner because of prestige, or they will hoard the money, meaning they won't save the money in the bank. So it is not channelized, whatever the little amount of money they have also is not being channelized for investment. And the rich minority, they have the ability to save, but they don't save because they spend on something called as conspicuous consumption. So conspicuous consumption is openly demonstrating that you're rich. Performing the daughter's wedding in a very grand manner, the birthday parties, all this in a lavish manner, going on holidays. Conspicuous, openly demonstrating that your status. In the first year, in the law of demand exception, Veblen effect must have come across. Same thing. People want to spend lavishly to prove their status instead of using that money for savings and investment. So because poor people, they are not able to save, and rich people, they are also not saving. So finally, what is happening? The country is having low capital formation, which leads to low productivity again. Okay. Then the next one is the socio-cultural constraint. So socio-cultural constraints, most of the people in the underdeveloped countries, they are all having the backward attitudes. So backward attitudes, they are deep rooted in their customs, traditions, superstitious beliefs. So all those beliefs are ingrained in them. So finally, what is happening that they are not participating in the economic development process of the country. If whatever the policies are being framed by the government, they are protesting, they are against it. They are not willing to come forward and participate in the economic developmental process of a country because they don't want to leave out their age-old beliefs and customs. For example, most of the time, for a long period of time, the government has been telling the farmers, the rural people, to migrate to the cities. But then, because too much of people in agricultural sector, it is not fetching any income for them. But then they are unwilling to migrate, shift from rural areas to urban area. Just now I told you factor immobility. Shifting from rural area to urban area is also one of the mobility only. But then majority of the people, rural people in our country, they are not willing to shift from rural area to urban area. So like that, they are all deep rooted in all those customs, beliefs, backward attitudes, unwilling to participate in the process of economic development of the country. So that is another constraint entering the development. The next one is the agricultural constraint. Most of the underdeveloped countries, they are predominantly agricultural. So predominantly agriculture means agriculture contributes more to the employment. That means majority of the sections of the labor force, they will be employed in agriculture, and also its share in GDP. So in both out of the primary, secondary, and tertiary sector, agricultural contribution is more both in employment as well as its share in GDP. But the problem is agricultural itself is backward. So why agricultural sector is backward in all these underdeveloped countries? Because of backward methods of production, old and outdated methods of production. So that's why modern methods of cultivation is not happening in the agricultural sector. That's why the employment is more in agricultural sector. So too much cook spoils the broth, we will say, isn't it? So more and more amount of employment labor force depending on agricultural sector, the productivity of the labor force keeps on decreasing. So, and if the agricultural sector is producing enormously, then it can contribute more to the national income. But with this backward techniques of production, if the agricultural sector itself is backward, what contribution can it make to the national income of a country? Isn't it? So we are not, you should have the proper seeds, fertilizers, irrigation facilities should be there. So unless all those things are implemented in the country, agricultural sector will not develop. But these countries still depend on agricultural sector because they cannot invest in industries. The industries require even more investment and enormous investment. Agricultural, the labor force depending on agriculture sector because they don't need any qualification to be depending on farm. So majority of the people, just now we saw health, what is the human capital in the country? Most of them are illiterate or partially literate, that's all. So they can easily depend on agriculture than being getting employment in somewhere, some other sector. So but finally what is happening, it is just pulling down the agricultural sector, along with it the country of the economic development of the country also. So that is the agricultural constraint. And then the next one is the foreign trade constraint. See, foreign trade, this is, the foreign trade actually, this particular sector can lead to the development of an economy. C plus I plus G plus X minus M, that is national income, isn't it? So this X minus M, the foreign trade sector, can actually promote the other sectors of a country. But then the problem with all these underdeveloped countries is they fail to use this advantage. So the reason is, I explained to you what is the meaning of self-reliance. Self-reliance means what? Whatever the commodities which you can export at a manufacture in your country at a lesser cost, those commodities should be exported to the other countries, and with that amount of surplus received, whatever the commodities you want to import from the other countries, that should be used. You can import. That is self-reliance. But then most of these underdeveloped countries, see, they can export all these primary products, they can export all these raw materials, they can export all these agricultural commodities, they can export all these consumer products, even though the value compared to the other capital goods and the finished goods lesser, still at the initial stage of development they can export these commodities, and they can import whatever the other commodities they want. And later they have to shift from, that is the structural changes in economic development. Later they have to shift from production and export of all these raw materials, consumer goods, etc., to the production and export of capital goods and finished products, like that. So that change should happen, that shifting should happen. But then most of these underdeveloped countries, they fail to do so. So what they are doing, they are continuously exporting only the raw material, they are continuously exporting only the consumer goods, and they are not developing with that amount of money income received, they are not developing the other sectors. I mean, was export is happening at the cost of imports, other sectors. Okay, so most of the, let me write it in words, but as I mentioned, foreign trade constraint, it should be used for the development of the country. But these underdeveloped countries, they are not using it. Why? What they are doing? But most of the underdeveloped countries, UDC underdeveloped countries, failed due to this reason. due to they are not utilizing the foreign surplus properly. So what they are doing, exporting at the cost of developing. When I say at the cost of developing other sectors, mean they are not developing the other sector. They are ignoring the, to put it very frankly, they are ignoring the other sectors and they are concentrating only on export, only those particular commodities that can be exported. Only that particular sector they are concentrating. And then, so that's a cost of that surplus is not being utilized. And then another problem what we have is too much of dependence on international on this. We are just totally depending upon the export of these commodities. So too much dependence on the export of certain commodities. What will happen? So you are depending upon some international demand for your commodity. So this international or international demand, what is happening? It is not stable, isn't it? It is international foreign market is very, very volatile. So there will always be fluctuations, or international trade or demand results in instability. Because your export, your revenue, your surplus, your income, everything is depending upon the demand from some foreign demand. So this foreign demand in international, there are so many competitors. So many countries can export whatever the commodity you are exporting, isn't it? So it is very, very unreliable. So you should not be depending upon the export of those commodities for your own income. Its international market is extremely volatile. So the country, it is subject to too much of fluctuations. So because of this, the country is not able to develop. But unfortunately, they are depending only on that, and they are not able to develop their own country. And they are on the top of it, they have failed to utilize the foreign exchange earned to develop the other sectors of the country. And now, because of all this globalization and all, if there any recession or anything, any problem, any economic crisis is happening in any one part of the world, it very easily transmits to other parts of the world because of the globalization process we are having. Okay, so these are all the constraints or the factors that are hindering the economic development of a country. Okay, and next video we will see, we have seen the problems, but we should also know what are all the factors that is favoring the economic development of a country, so which I will explain to you in my next class. Okay, so if you find this video useful, please like, share and subscribe. And if you have any doubts or suggestions, please don't fail to mention in the comment box. Okay, so until my next class, take care. Bye bye.